So never trust a bulletin. As I've already said, Michael Ellick is sick, and I am no Michael Ellick. And it also says the sermon's going to be called Conversations with Satan, and it is not. And the reason is I really don't know anything about Satan. But I do know a little bit about betrayal. And when Michael called earlier this morning to say that he just couldn't do it, I decided to take a good long look at the text. And the word that stuck out for me was the word betrayal. Clearly, he was on the right bead in terms of the text saying that Satan entered Judas, and that Judas then went and did something called betrayal. He even plotted. It was intentional. It wasn't by accident. He decided that he would turn Jesus over to the authorities as soon as he could do it in a way when there was no crowd. So that's the little text that we have in this Passion series that we've been doing. And my interest in the subject of betrayal rather than Satan is betrayal is something that has happened to just about all of us. Either large B betrayal, somebody walked out on us, somebody stole from us, somebody didn't pay us back, somebody lied to us about something that was important. And surely, if that hasn't happened to you yet, you've experienced small b betrayal. Things that happened that shouldn't have happened. People who didn't show up when they were supposed to show up. I'm not mad at Michael for not showing up this morning. That's not my direction. This is hardly betrayal. But things don't go always the way they are supposed to go. And so I wanted to tell you what little bit I do know about betrayal. And the first is that we're often complicit in it ourselves. It's not really an outside enemy, but it's something like a lie. Surely you've learned by the lies you've told that we usually lie when we can't face something in ourselves. We'll say, well, we don't want to hurt anybody or we don't want to upset anybody, but the truth is we haven't faced inside what we don't want to tell them. So we don't tell them, and you know what happens. There is a kind of reproductive aspect to lying that no birth control can manage. So if there's something you want to stop it early. And face it first in yourself so you don't go on to betray yourself first and become complicit in larger betrayals and then go on to betray others. Another thing we find out about betrayal is it's almost always the closest suspect. Like a small town cop, when somebody's murdered, who do they look for first? The husband, the wife, the son, the daughter. Because folk wisdom and folk knowledge tells us that betrayal happens in the circle more often than from outside. Now, a drone may hit you, right? And an asteroid may take out Kansas. They'll never get close to New York City, I promise you. But more often, the bad thing that happens has the complicity of those closest to you. They didn't tell you it was coming, or they lied to themselves, or some way the bad thing happened because of the participation of those around you. Whenever anybody says, I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you, watch out. Because by the time they tell you that, you've already been hurt. And now you're doubly hurt because of the silence that happened. So I like to think of Jesus' batting average with genuine first-class capital B betrayal as pretty good. 2 out of the 12 of his disciples, that's pretty good, right? Look at your own life. I think his track record with small b betrayal is a bit worse. Kind of people all the time showed up to be in the crowd, but not to go any further, right? There were a lot of people who enjoyed the charism of Jesus, the way he had the courage to speak out to others. But when it was time to really make the big change he was after, he was awfully alone, as he put it. So pretty good track record on big B's and a pretty sorry track record on small B's. And I wonder if that might not be true for us. And this is where I'd like to go in. So betrayal, to me, is like two things. The first thing is it's like having a spiritual heart attack. Nothing is ever the same after that. You're always different. But also, what we know about people who survive heart disease, and a lot of people do, is that the blood, once blocked, finds a way to go through another way. I have a dear, dear friend who has just died, but he lived for 20 years out in Riverhead, high school English teacher, marvelous man, my church moderator for over and over again out there. He had heart disease that took out a third of his heart. The infection resulted in the heart just not working there anymore. He had a 1/3 dead heart inside him, but the 2/3 that he had responded so beautifully to the recycling of the blood that he was actually a pretty healthy man. And he amazed everybody. The doctors were not amazed, though. They knew that when blood is blocked one direction, it has an interest in going another direction. And I'm going to put a more positive image, because about betrayal, I know that the blood is blocked. It's like a heart attack. It hurts. It's scary. It's big. And we go on. Not but we go on. And we go on. The second image I'd put before you is that of a waterfall. I was up in Fishkill yesterday, hiking all around in the mountains, because it's a great time of year to be in the mountains because the waterfalls are huge. The water is bigger than it almost ever is in mud season. And what's remarkable about a waterfall is the way it works around the rocks. And if you've seen a waterfall last year that came down cascading one way, and you go back and see it this year, it's not the same way. It's different. The water figures out how to do like the blood does and find a way through. Again, big B betrayal and small b betrayal are like that. They find a way around what's blocking them, and people go on. Now, I want to keep those images in mind as we go through this, because I know how many of you have been betrayed in different ways, and I've watched you unblock. I've watched you spring after spring and see that your water comes around in a different way and you still flow on. So I'll begin with the examples. There are going to be 6, and I'll be brief. My 3 favorite lies I tell myself, which are then the prelude to betrayal. The first one is I like to tell people I'm not old yet. And that's because I'm really in near permanent denial about being 65 years old. And I was so helped by an article in Woman's Day, which I picked up, that said that there are 3 stages to aging, and that early old is 65 to 75, and middle old is 75 to 85, and old is 85 to 95. And I just loved it. And so now I get to say I am early old, and it blocks some of the sense of what the betrayal of death or aging might be. The second lie I like to tell myself is that I can still multitask. I can still do 3 things at once, and that multitasking will be my salvation. Well, that is a really big lie, and it has betrayal attached to it, because the way it betrays is I'll tell you I can do that, and you I can do that, and you I can do that, and guess what? I can't. And so betrayal, small b, develops in the lie that we tell ourselves about multitasking, and I know I'm not the only one. The third lie I love is that I can be constantly active without being reflective about it. Those of you who have gone to seminary or gone through education, masters or whatever, know about this process of pedagogy called action reflection, and it's always action-reflection. And of course, we in Protestantism are completely activist, hyperactive, Protestant work ethic. We've really got the action thing down, and we don't have the reflection thing down. And I am very interested in how that distortion, that action is the solution to things, works to betray justice and to betray the things we hope for. I'm particularly interested in it this March, when Michael and I have been talking a lot about how this is the first season that either of us has been at Judson when we didn't have some big outside hoop-de-doo going on. That we could just run on down and, take care of. Occupy, Islamophobia, immigration crisis. Come on, give us a big outside thing and we can rev up this whole congregation and we can get going. Well, and we have done this as Judson by following the energy in the world, and it's really fun. But this year, after the election, right, we elected the president, there's been a sense of plop in activism. And I think it's not just in activism, but in many other things. And when we say we have to be nonstop active, you see what's going to happen, how the betrayal gets set up, that we participate in a betrayal. What a magnificent season this is for reflection on what we want out of the next decade, the next moment, the next movement. What a gift it is to be stopped in your activist tracks and have to think about something. So I sometimes call this, and I want to choose my language very carefully, the cluster luck of betrayal. Now, how does that work? If you can cluster your lies or your personal distortions, then you can almost find out where you want to go to prevent the maximum possible betrayal. So let me use a bigger example, and that is what I think of as the way our economic system lies to us. It tells us that if we just work harder, everything will be fine. And many people feel betrayed by that. I'm looking at your faces. You get thrown out of your apartment because it needs to get gentrified. You lose your job for no good reason. You can't get a loan if you live in the Rockaways for no good reason. And all of a sudden, because of the way we think about ourselves, inside this system, we think it must be our fault. Well, it is not. As a person who really spends more time in one-on-one sessions than I ever thought I would in ministry, because I believe in the yoke of public and parochial ministry so powerfully, what I am seeing is more and more personal devastation and betrayal by economic factors than I've ever imagined seeing in my life. And so I am spending most of my days saying to people, it's not your fault. At least understand it's not your fault. As Amy and Kimber said in their debt testimony in the fall, you heard all the things that piled up. What I want to say about the betrayal of the economic system is that it is not your fault, but it is our responsibility. And the more reflection we can do on changing it, the better. Just one example. One of the most gifted people who ever came through here has been gone now for several years, and I'm not going to name her. Yesterday, she called to say that her father was dying and that she was supposed to have a birthday, and she had a big story to do for this important agency for which she was working. And she didn't know what to do, but she especially didn't know what to do, whether to go home and be with him or do the story or what, because she was so ashamed that she was 30-something years old, living in a twin bed with somebody in somebody else's apartment, no health insurance, in a debt crisis, and no savings. Now, this woman should be president. That's how good she is. And she works for a very famous organization. What kind of story is that? And if you tell me you haven't heard it before 3 times this week, I'll wonder what rock you're lying under. Because that's what's going on. The betrayal of capitalism. The economic system is being internalized in people, and the system is blocking the blood and blocking the water and blocking the gifts. Now, what we know about betrayal is that it won't work. What's the Easter message? Judas did his best, it didn't work. What we know is there's a way that those betrayed can work around the rocks in their way, the disease in their way, the systems in their way. I was very interested. A lot of you are saying, oh, here she goes on the economic system again. It was my parents that betrayed me. I was so moved by that story of the child who was abandoned in the subway. I'm sure you saw it. And 2 men adopted him, and now he's 12 years old. His name is Kevin. It's been all over the news. It's such a beautiful story of being betrayed and then being picked up, like the heart healing or the waterfall going. But the story that was around it that was told, because obviously the reporters wanted to know who else had experienced this, was a high school teacher named Maxwell, who when he retired, he always made the kids call him Mr. something, but when he retired, he said to his students on the last day of class, to the 5th graders that he taught, you can now call me Maxwell, because I'm not your teacher anymore. I can be your friend. And just ask me anything and call me by my first name. And apparently one of the kids said, Maxwell, is it okay if I start calling you Dad now? And he adopted the kid and said to the news reporter who was doing all this cluster of betrayed children, he said, I was looking for a son the same way Oman was looking for a father. That's how the heart heals. It says, okay, I'm not going to have that kind of family, but I'm going to have this kind of family. Last spring, I got the water down straight that way, and it didn't mess up the pig farmer's place over there. This year, I'm going to take it down this way, because those rocks are messed up, and they're in my way. Betrayal is not the final word. If you haven't read Adam Phillips' book called Missing Out, In Praise of an Unlived Life, get it. It's a really good book about how we try too hard to have the life we think we're supposed to have, and all the time the life that we have is there, the heart that we have is there, the direction of the water that we have is there. And in this book, Phillips, it's where he coined the phrase, good enough mother. Surely some of you have heard that phrase. It's a really great idea. What he says is that a good enough mother is sometimes responsive to her children and sometimes just doesn't get around to it. And that is really good for children because it teaches them how to be disappointed and how to be satisfied, which are really good life lessons, right? So the book is about living the life you have rather than the life you think you missed, which is where so much of our emotional energy goes and where we are self-betraying. And in his book, when he talks about the good enough mother, you find a way to not lie to yourself so much, right? I did that, I didn't do that. The water's trying to work around the stones in another way. So, in conclusion, I've already said the big news, which is betrayal is not final. Judas failed. And the Easter message is that there's more life after death, perhaps even than before. And what I want to leave you stuck with is that if you have a real heart attack or a spiritual heart attack, wait for the blood to reroute. And hopefully you won't have a spiritual heart attack or a physical heart attack. Go out and look at some waterfalls and watch how creative they are. Amen.